The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is doing his best to drown out the interventions of two former Prime Ministers while touring Western Australia. Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull have intervened in the energy debate just months from the federal election. Political reporter Amy Greenbank joins us again now. Amy, we heard from Scott Morrison in the last half an hour or so. What did he have to say?
Good afternoon, Kirsten. Well, Prime Minister Scott Morrison is on an unofficial election campaign tour around Western Australia today. He's been visiting key electorates, he's been meeting with voters at the pub and announcing congestion-busting measures. But his message has been largely drowned out by the intervention of two former Prime Ministers. Tony Abbott says he now will backtrack on his calls for Australia to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. And Malcolm Turnbull has made some remarkable comments about why he believes he was booted from the top job in August. But Scott Morrison says that this will not dissuade him from the task at hand, and he will leave the squabbling to those that are absorbed in history.
I'm not really distracted by them at all. See, I'm focused on what I need to do for the future of the country. I don't get distracted by all the bubble noise on these things. I know others do. I know it's terribly interesting to all of those who ride inside the bubble. Australians don't live in the bubble. Australians live out here.
Amy, did Tony Abbott explain his change of heart?
He did, and the context here is interesting as well. Tony Abbott was in a debate with candidates in his blue ribbon seat of Warringah, where he's facing a stiff challenge from high-profile independent candidate Zali Steggall. Now, Zali Steggall is campaigning hard on the issue of climate change. She's pushing for more action to be taken, and this is the context where the comments were made. Now, Tony Abbott has backflipped on his calls for Australia to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreements, which is quite the step back from what he was pushing for when Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister.
We've got a new Prime Minister and a new Energy Minister.
So when Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, we should get out of Paris.
We had an emissions obsession that needed to be broken, and it's now changed.
But you now think it's okay to be in this international agreement?
Well, as we have said all along, we believe that we can meet our Paris targets without substantial policy change and without significant additional costs on the economy.
Now, from one former Prime Minister to another, and Amy, Malcolm Turnbull has been talking again about last year's leadership change, telling a BBC interviewer why he thought he was replaced as leader. What did he have to say?
And it was quite an extraordinary claim he made on international television. He believes the reason he was ousted from the top job was not because his colleagues were afraid they would lose the federal election, but that they were worried they would win it. Now, he went on to suggest that internal Liberal polling suggested they were ahead in marginal seats. And despite the fact that the coalition had lost around 40 news polls in a row, he had a good shot at winning the election.
We were level pegging on the public polls with the opposition, and we were 4 points ahead on the polling in the marginal seats. But basically you could argue that their concern was not that I would lose the election, but rather that I would win it.
Now, Kirsten, no doubt these two interventions have not been particularly helpful or well-timed for Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who is facing an uphill battle with a federal election just over 2 months away.
That's Amy Greenbank in Canberra.